When it comes to Halo, I've played a small portion of the first game, all of the second game, and an even smaller portion of the third game. I've also played Halo Infinite's multiplayer. That counts, right? I have a basic understanding of the lore that I've gleaned through friends and lore channels I watch here on YouTube. That's right, my life is so boring that I watch Halo lore. What I'm trying to say here is that I'm not really invested in Halo as a series, and for that reason, in my humble, aka right opinion, I am the one person that can give you a nuanced and unbiased opinion on whether Paramount Plus's Halo TV series is trash or not. So, without further ado, let's get into this. We start out with an establishing shot of some Arrakis wannabe. We then get some ham-fisted exposition to what's going on here. There appears to be some sort of civil war going on between the UNSC and some of the outlier colonies. It's also here where we get some Spartan lore. Then we cut to some teenagers doing what teenagers do best, being stupid and consuming drugs whilst doing so. There are about 6 of these teenagers, but you'll only need to remember one. That's because in 5 minutes, all but one of them will be dead. Quan, the girl with the objectively worst haircut of the bunch, is the only character that matters here. Call me cynical, but I'm already worried that this character will be a Mary Sue. I've yet to actually see any blatant Mary Sue indicators, but the running trend of female protagonists being poorly written doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. Quan notices a light and goes to inspect it. There she sees a spooky ship. She then runs to her friends telling them they need to bail. Of course, teenagers being teenagers, they disregard this and immediately get ass-ploded. Bro, it really takes less than 10 seconds for all these kids to be vaporized in hilarious fashion. During the chaos, Quan launches a flare alerting the base. Also, she gets back to the base on foot, which makes no sense. If you recall the earlier establishing shots, you'll see that she and the other idiots were quite far from the base. That's a lot of distance to run, let alone not get shot considering the lack of cover. This could have been avoided had they used vehicles to get out there, but we don't see any of that. Therefore, I'm left to assume that Quan ran what looks like a couple miles at least without getting shot. I don't know, maybe the Covenant decided to have a picnic on the charred remains of the dead children instead of finishing their fucking job? Nevertheless, once entering the base, Quan runs into a shelter and hides. The base gets assaulted merely seconds afterward. I guess the picnic theory is out of the question. A force of Covenant elite immediately begins to slaughter the fine folks of this generic sci-fi desert town. Whilst Quan hides with some random child she found, she sees her father get pinned under his Jeep, I guess.
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
She then decides to leave the shelter and rescue them. At least that's what I think she's trying to do. All she does is run around and watch people get GG'd. This scene was beyond poorly executed. One of the separatists shit himself, and then runs to the hole where all the people were hiding. An elite sees this, kills him, and slaughters the hiding civilians. Ah, so that's why she left. Not to save her father, but good old Deus Ex Machina. Suddenly a ship flies overhead. A Spartan comes out and beats up an elite. Then more Spartans come out and also beat up elites. The Separatists and Spartans team up against the elites in a pretty underwhelming battle scene, if I'm honest. I think the most memorable part of this battle scene was when an elite chases Quan and then proceeds to get sniped by one of the Spartans. Why would an elite chase an unarmed civilian when there's actual threats? It made sense for that other elite to kill all those people in the shelter because clearly the Separatist guns weren't doing anything to them. But now that the Spartans have arrived, they'd actually have to take the engagement seriously. Priorities, people! Another thing I noticed during this scene was some jank CGI. There were several instances of this, but the one I noticed most was the part where John Halo throws down an assault rifle. Why does this look so bad?
Alter position.
I replayed this scene like 12 times to wrap my head around what was going on in this scene and why it looked so weird. And I've come to the conclusion that they decided to use CGI instead of using a real gun, and it just looks really, really bad. I don't know why they thought this was a good idea to use this. It boggles my mind. Let's just say that the fact that the most memorable parts of this battle were either CGI flubs or nonsensical decisions made by the participant is not a good sign. Back on track, Kwan's dad sees an elite moving toward his daughter. He then tries to stop it, but the elite pulls a Mortal Kombat fatality on his bitch ass.
Fatality.
The elite then decides to attack Kwan, an unarmed civilian, rather than worry about the fact that all his guys are dead and there's fucking Spartans there. Priorities, motherfuckers! John Halo sees this and pulls off an Overwatch play of the game on his dumbass. The Spartans then report to command and leave. This took 17 minutes of my life. The intro is John Halo putting on clothing. It is so bad that I skipped it within the first 5 seconds. After the intro, we see Kwan wandering around because she's an important character. We then cut to the Spartan squad looking for the ship the Covenant used to land. They split into two groups, one to deal with the Phantom, and the other to explore a nearby cave. They find a relic that the Covenant had been apparently excavating. This site appears to be a 20-minute drive from the city they just blew up. Why did they not annihilate the outpost first, then drill? Clearly, the Covenant should have known they'd be spotted sooner or later. Also, John Halo finds the artifact and touches it. This very blatantly triggers a flashback. The flashback also tells us nothing, other than John Halo has Alzheimer's. Also, there is an elite here. He gets spooked, turns invisible, and bails, bumping into Kwan, who happened to be there for some reason. The Spartans decide they need to take back some of the Covenant tech as well as Kwan. Now we get to see the UNSC HQ on Planet Reach.
Oh my god! Wow!
Not gonna lie, this looks like a pretty generic sci-fi city. A science lady is going over John Halo's findings when some bureaucrat enters the room to argue with her about there only being one survivor at the outpost. Apparently, Science Lady runs the whole Spartan program. Then the argument shifts to who gets first dibs on the relic. Science Lady convinces the bureaucrat that she should get it. What nuanced argument did she use? Finders keepers. I'm not even kidding.
Alien tech is Miranda's division.
John found it. It belongs here.
I know they can't put a full-blown discussion about it, but come on, they could have made it something at least a little less juvenile. Also, Science Lady's name is Catherine Halsey. I'll see if I can remember it, but so far she looks like another unmemorable white bitch. The bureaucrat happens to find an unauthorized project that was basically sitting out in the open. She then proceeds to refer to the Science Lady as a genius, then tells her to shut it down. I don't know about you guys, but having an unauthorized and perhaps unethical science experiment at your workplace, outright in the open where anyone can see it, does not strike me as a thing a genius would do. Next, we get an establishing shot of High Charity, the Covenant HQ. It starts with one of those Covenant leader douchebags talking to someone. Then everything turns to shit when it's actually a human that he's talking to. Congrats, Paramount, you really did your research on that one. Given the circumstances, the Covenant would never work with a human. Plus, this lady's outfit looks like one of those cringy high-fashion shit shows you'd see Kim Kardashian or Lady Gaga wearing at an award show. They discuss the loss of the artifact, and Mercy, the Covenant leader douchebag, grants the lady with no fashion sense permission to go see John Halo. Quan wakes up in a holding cell on the Pelican John Halo is piloting. I mean, autopiloting. John Halo himself is just brooding in a chair. She is then accosted by the hologram of Miranda Keyes, who then asks her to be a talking head for the UNSC. Of course, she declines, because the UNSC was bad to her family before. She then tells Miranda her stupid plan to lie, in order to negotiate for the freedom of Madrigal. You know, the planet that got butt-fucked by a group of 20 elites. Well, to be fair, that was just one outpost, and it wasn't the whole planet, but I'm assuming it would go the same either way. Furthermore, considering the power that has been established to be held by the UNSC, they could just make her disappear. This girl has the critical thinking skills of a toddler. Science Lady and some dweeb discuss how John Halo's body reacted to the object. Science Lady asks Mr. Halo himself what's going on, and he mentions that he saw some things, namely a flashback to that time he walked in on his parents boning, a memory that had been long since locked away into the recesses of his mind. Next, we get a scene where John has to check his body for abnormalities. For some reason, this machine happens to be in the prisoner bay. Do the writers here eat paste? Is it part of their diet? Do they consume it on a consistent basis? Who thought this was passable writing? We cut back to where Keyes talks to Keyes. Yeah, she talks to her dad. There's clearly some nepotism going on in the USNC. Also, they discuss that there has been an order to terminate Quan. They are doing her a favor because clearly she is too stupid to exist in this reality. Miranda struggles with being complicit in what is the reality of war. It's almost like the UNSC is taking the natural discourse in this situation. But we need to humanize these characters, baby! Quan eats food next to the chief and tells him he killed her mom. This girl is just willing to spill everything. At this exact moment, John Halo gets the orders to kill Quan. Instead of doing his job and a favor to the universe, he just kind of awkwardly walks out the door. Don completely disregards this request and shuts down the live feed. The bureaucrats panic and argue, and then they decide to disable the oxygen in the ship, or at least lower the oxygen to the point where they're gonna pass out, I guess. John Halo somehow restores the oxygen to the ship. The UNSC loses their shit and sends the base on full alert. The whole base goes code red. This scene is asinine. I get that this dude is a really powerful soldier, but they're acting like this guy is freaking Godzilla approaching Tokyo to buttfuck it again. Did the man not need a whole squad to eliminate a group of 20 elites? This makes Master Chief's abilities appear completely arbitrary. Halsey tells John Halo's other groupies that they need to go kill all the friendlies and secure John Halo. On the ship, Quan grabs a gun and threatens to kill John Halo. John tells her the gun won't do shit, so he takes off his helmet, and that's where I stopped watching.
Wow.
Let's talk about adapting properties that already have established lore, established characters, and massive fan bases. It's always going to be an uphill battle, especially with video game IPs. The fan base is immediately going to disregard everything because they know you'll screw it up. And you will, because you're Hollywood troglodytes. However, it is possible to win them over, provided you don't completely fuck it up. Well, John Halo removing his helmet to reveal this John Johnson looking motherfucker is exactly where you went from salvageable to shit's fucked. It's not even the actor that's a problem, it's the face reveal in general. Halo has existed for over 2 decades, and it made a point to not reveal Master Chief's face. There are a myriad of reasons for this, but my personal favorite is the idea that Master Chief is meant to represent the player. To completely disregard, let alone disregard it in the first episode of the series, is the definition of tone deaf. There were already problems with the disregard of core lore aspects and characters. However, I was willing to overlook them. Changing smaller aspects of lore, or focusing on different stories in a series based on a pre-existing idea, is fine. However, the problem we have here is Paramount took way too much creative control, and then proceeded to take a ranted dump on important series tropes. I don't even want to imagine how much worse it will get. And no, I wasn't even kidding when I said that's where I stopped. I'm not gonna finish this shitty episode. It already took 40 minutes of my life I won't be getting back. Overall, the first episode of Paramount's Halo started out middling and then proceeded to slowly and methodically shit the bed. I have stated before that I'm not a Halo fan, so very small changes would likely not upset me. But the Jank Cgi and the disregard for what makes Halo Halo really ruins a show that would still likely be mediocre. It is not a good sign for this series when a non-fan such as myself can see how phoned in this first episode is. The series is very clearly putting Quan in the spotlight, despite the fact that she is poorly written and lacks any semblance of personality other than being stupid. Outrunning the elites was bad writing. Leaving the shelter was clearly usage of Deus Ex Machina. And finally, that whole Spartan sniper versus elite scenario was an intertwining of both. And that was only in the first 17 minutes of this episode. As I stated before, I did not finish the episode, but I wouldn't be surprised if Quan became a Spartan in episode 2. I understand this is the first episode, but establishing the characters is extremely important. The first episode completely failed to make anyone likable or interesting. I know next to nothing about these people other than shitty exposition dumps, which half the time are contradicted by what's happening on screen. I've seen a few people simping for the series on Twitter. Their argument normally boils down to, if you don't compare it to the video games, it's actually good. And while I agree in some cases, this case, not quite so much. Even if we remove the Halo context from this series, we've already been given several instances of bad writing and bad visual effects. You cannot tell me with a straight face that anyone would acknowledge the series, anyone would give it the time of day, if it did not have the Halo name to fall back on. This was the most phoned-in shit show I have ever had the displeasure of watching. I can only imagine how real Halo fans feel about it.